Pandemic. By A.S. Geek 2012. Chapter 43. Betrayal and Doubt. Harry, I thought we already had this settled, Sarah said in a plaintive voice. No, Sarah, you're misunderstanding me, said Harold. It's not what you're thinking. Sarah gave her husband a wary look. This isn't about guilt over leaving your father. It's not that at all. Sarah let out a small sigh, her eyes uncertain. Please, listen to me, Harold said in a softer voice. You had the same dream I did. I did, too, said Jenny. From what I'm overhearing, every pony did, said James. I don't deny that it was very profound, said Sarah. And it made me see some of my life choices in a different light, but that's exactly what's happened to me, Harold said. Sarah wanted to believe her husband was sincere. For all her focus on her own career, she had assumed that Harold had turned to IT as a career because he had wanted it. Having heard indirectly from Bob the night before that it had simply been expedient was a revelation. But you got out of farming by your own choice, said Sarah. At least that's what I had thought. No, what I had done was leave an overbearing father, said Harold in a low voice. I just didn't want to admit that. But why? Harold lowered his head, his ears drooping slightly. I was everything to him, Sarah, especially after my mother died when I was 6. I didn't want to confront him about what I really thought. It was better for him to think that I wanted a career change. Sarah tilted her head. But you didn't see a future in farming. That's what you told him. Sarah took a step towards him. That's what you told me. Harold raised his head and looked Sarah in the eye. I was lying. Not just to you and my father, but to myself. And now you want to go back to your father's farm? Sarah asked in a slightly quavering voice. No, of course not. This isn't about the past, it's about the future. James' father Ken stepped forward. Behind him, a Pegasus mare with a lemon-yellow coat and dark green mane stood with an uncertain look in her blue eyes and her tail tucked between her rear legs. That's the sense I got from my dream, too, said Ken. Don't look behind, just look ahead. Sarah, we can't keep living in this shelter being fed by our caretakers, said Harold. We're going to have to fend for ourselves. How is my IT experience going to help there? Sarah thought back to her discussion with the white mare in her dream, when she struggled with resolving the lessons of her vision with her life goals. Wasn't Harold simply doing the same thing? For as much as she loved him, she sometimes thought there was still so much about him she didn't know. If you hadn't left your father's farm, we never would have met, said Sarah. Harold smiled. I know. That's why I want to stop regretting that decision. So tell me straight this time. Tell me the absolute truth. Do you really think you'd actually like farming as a career? As a career, no, said Harold. Because I want to and because I really feel like I can do it and enjoy it, yes. Sarah blinked in confusion. I'm not sure I understand the difference. It's hard for me to explain. It's like how you pursued your theories because it was what you wanted to do despite how much trouble it caused. To be blunt, Sarah, it wasn't doing your career any good. Sarah could not find fault with that statement. While she certainly hoped that the revelations Twilight had laid out about Earth's past would help her recover her fortunes, she was no longer looking at in light of the accolades she might receive or the fame she might earn. She just wanted to follow her passion. Mom, is money even going to matter anymore? Jenny asked. I don't think it will, said Ken. He chortled. So maybe I don't have to worry about making this month's mortgage payment. Sarah only then realized how distant her financial woes had become in the past few days. Now that the immediate crisis was over, she had trouble summoning up the effort to worry about them anymore. Perhaps she was already starting to look towards the future rather than the past. Yet she still had to hear from another family member. Bob, you've been quiet. Surely you have an opinion on this. Several sets of eyes turned to Bob, and more than one with some sympathy. Bob stood balanced on his rear hooves, his horn having fully emerged. His stooped-over posture reminded the others of the discomfort of that final day before it was done. "I didn't have the same dream you all did." Jenny's eyes widened. "You didn't? Maybe because he's not a full pony yet," James suggested. "So I didn't feel qualified to give an opinion on it," said Bob. "Vision or not, I feel like I have a clearer direction," said Harold. "I can only imagine what Laura is thinking about all this." "I really want to see her, Harry," said Sarah, her eyes glistening. "They shouldn't be keeping us from her anymore." It pained her to no end that she could not tell her own husband her worries about Laura's association with Sunny. While she struggled to find what was so bad about being a pony now, she still didn't know what Sunny's motivations or intentions were beyond their transformation. Even assuming that Sunny had somehow given them this shared dream, it seemed an inherently positive message. What possible evil intent did Sunny have in mind? That unanswered question made her shiver. Harold frowned. "Yeah, I don't get it either why they're not allowing us to reunite with her." Sarah's eyes flicked to the side. She refused to outright lie to Harold by stating that she didn't know either, not after Harold had just taken pains to confess his own lies, even if they were more a self-deception. "I keep hearing rumors that they're going to let us go soon," said Ken. "I think they're just waiting for stragglers like me," said Bob. "Sorry I'm holding everything up." "Don't be," said Harold. "We can be patient a little longer, but it still doesn't mean they can't transfer Laura here." "She didn't want to be taken from her friends," said Sarah. "If they are letting every pony go, it would only be for a day or so. Or we could go to her." Harold glanced at the others around him and said in a lower voice, "I don't want to leave the friends I just made, either, but family has to come first." "Speaking of making friends," said Ken as he stepped to the side and turned partially towards the yellow Pegasus mare. "My wife has something she wants to say to you." Jenny glanced at the Pegasus, her eyes widening slightly, and she cast an inquisitive look at James. James just smiled. Sarah sensed Harold bristle a bit, and his ears did draw back briefly before slowly relenting. The mare James' mother Margaret stepped forward. "I, just wanted to apologize," she said in a contrite voice. Her eyes flicked to Jenny for a moment. "For my behavior when I called you to complain about your daughter." "I'm sorry." Harold stepped forward. "It's fine, Margaret. Mistakes were made all around." "Maggie," she said with a small smile. "You can call me Maggie." *. Kevin arrived to see Laura hovering before some of the technicians. "But what happened to her?" she demanded in a voice of rising agitation. "We told you, Miss Tanner," said one. "Miss Summers is ill and we decided to move her out of the shelter to avoid infecting others." "But why won't you tell me any more than that? What's wrong with her?" "We're not sure yet, which is why we need to observe her more closely." "Can I see her?" Laura asked. "Again, she may be infectious." Laura frowned. "This is ridiculous. She was perfectly healthy this morning. All she had was some digestive issues." "Ma'am, sometimes illnesses are like that," said another of the technicians. "They can come on suddenly. Is she at least okay?" "We can't comment on her condition at this time." "Oh, come on!" Laura cried. As Kevin looked on, another Pegasus mare with a tricolored mane touched a hoof to Laura's shoulder. "Laura, I know you're worried about your friend, but there's nothing we can do." Kevin recognized the voice. She was another one of his patients, Emma Franklin. Laura sighed, her ears drooping. She turned in the air to face Emma. "This doesn't make any sense. Why is every pony being so secretive? I thought we were finally getting through to them that they needed to be more open with us." Kevin had pledged to himself that he would lie as little as possible to Laura, but now he wondered if he would be able to come through on that promise. He was under no sort of secrecy rules concerning Sunset, yet he didn't want to shatter Laura's newfound confidence. While he would very much like to see her human again, he couldn't deny that the transformation had at least some positive effects on her. "Laura!" he finally called out. Laura whirled around. "Dr. Connor!" He gave her a small smile as she flew over to him. "It's good to see you again." Laura smiled. "Same here. It's nice to meet you when there's not a big crisis going on." "Yes, I've been told that you've become more comfortable with your transformation." "I'm just so glad it's over," said Laura. "Not knowing what or who I was had started to get to me. Things are a little more clear now." Kevin nodded. "I'm sorry He trailed off. He had almost said "I'm sorry I couldn't stop this," but that mattered not to those in the end state. It would only make his own feelings about it worse. "I just wanted to see how you were doing. I'm making the rounds to all my patients to see how they're getting along." "Dr. Connor, maybe you can help me," said Laura. She swept a forehoof towards the technicians. "My friend Sunny went to the bathroom and never came back. They keep telling me she's sick, but they won't tell me with what. Maybe if you talk to them, you can get them to tell me." Kevin hesitated, his expression somber. Laura's eyes widened, and she drew back. "Oh, no, is she really badly ill?" "It's not that, Laura," said Kevin. "There are special circumstances. She's alive and well, but unconscious at the moment." Laura raised a hoof to her muzzle, and she heard a gasp behind her as Emma and a white-coated Pegasus flew up. "Laura, I'm so sorry about your friend," said the latter. And that one would be Joan Kendrick. Realizing just how many of his patients were here was a sobering thought for Kevin. "For reasons I can't disclose right now, she has to remain sedated." Laura's eyes glistened. "If she regains consciousness, can I see her? Please? I just want her to know that some pony cares. She helped me so much when I was going through a really bad time." Kevin gave her a wan smile. "I know, which is why this is so difficult for me to tell you. We don't quite know what's going to happen yet, but you can be assured she's being watched very carefully." Laura nodded. "Thank you for telling me. I guess I looked to her like a second mother. I mean, don't let my real mother know I said that, but I'm going to arrange for you to be reunited with your family." Laura hesitated and gave the others a forlorn look. "Laura, we can do without you for a while," said Emma. "Yes, go tell your mother what you are able to do now," said Joan. "I think she'll be proud of you." Laura slowly smiled and nodded. She turned back to Kevin. "Yes, please, I'd like to see my family again." Kevin's smile became more natural. "Then I'll arrange it." "Thank you." She turned back to her friends. "Come on, I had more ideas about cloud management that I wanted to talk to you about. Let's gather the other Pegasi, too." As they flew off, Kevin couldn't help but feel proud of Laura, almost like a parent would. He and his deceased wife had never had any kids, and even if he remarried someday, he doubted he could stand the rigors of raising a child at his age. "Hey, Kevin," came a voice to the side. Kevin turned his head and looked down. "Hello, Fred." "So, tell me," said Fred in a soft voice. "They take her down?" Kevin sighed. "Yes. Good. I'll say this for her. She really knew how to put on a show. Never would have known it was her." Kevin looked off into the distance at Laura and said nothing. "Want my advice?" Fred said. "I think some pony should tell her the truth." "I can't make that call, Fred," said Kevin. "I can't judge whether she can handle it or not." Fred gave Kevin a sharp look. "Bullshit. Laura's not some delicate flower. She can take it. Yeah, it will be hard on her, but she's stronger than you think." "It's not my place to tell her," said Kevin. "I think that burden has to fall to her family." Fred's eyes widened. They're in on this. Mrs. Tanner is, said Kevin. I don't know if she's told the rest of the family. Then she's the right one to break it to her. The longer you wait, the harder it will be. If any pony understands what it's like to live a life for far too long, it's me. I'm arranging for the Tanner family to reunite, said Kevin. I'll make sure Mrs. Tanner is told what happened, and she can decide what to do. Asterisk. Sarah tried not to be nervous as she, Harold, and Jenny were shepherded out of the auditorium and into one of the classrooms, but strong emotions altered even her scent enough for Harold to detect. Sarah, what's going on? Harold said. I'm hoping we'll find out soon, said Sarah in a distant voice. You know something that I don't. We're going to be reunited with Laura, Harry, isn't that enough? Then why not just send her into the shelter? Said Harold. What's with all this cloak and dagger? I bet this has something to do with that FBI guy who talked to you that day we arrived, Jenny said, her voice a mix of curiosity and trepidation. Sarah couldn't lie to her family anymore, not when everything about her exposed her feelings to every pony around her. Perhaps the inability to hide things from her family would help keep her grounded more. All right, yes, it does. I just wasn't at liberty to discuss the matter. Harold raised an eyebrow. Not at liberty to discuss? When it has to do with our daughter. Harry, please, just be patient a little longer. You don't understand how much it upset me to keep things from you. The technicians guiding them reached a classroom with 2 FBI agents stationed in the hall, one of whom opened the door for them. Sarah tensed when she saw Anthony Heller. He looked at Sarah and said, Dr. Tanner. Yes, that's me, Sarah said. She gestured with a hoof. This is Harold, my husband, and Jenny, my younger daughter. I'm really hoping whatever you have to tell me, they can hear as well. They can, said Anthony. We have her, Dr. Tanner. Sunset Shimmer is in custody and your daughter Laura is perfectly safe. Sarah let out a sigh of relief. Thank you. Who's Sunset Shimmer? Harold asked. Laura's safe. Jenny asked in confusion. Why was she in danger in the first place? Sarah turned to her family. I'm truly sorry I couldn't tell you. Mr. Tanner, you can be proud of your wife, said Anthony. She understood the need for secrecy despite. Just tell me what the hell is going on, Harold demanded. Sunset Shimmer is the person behind the transformations, said Anthony. Jenny's eyes suddenly widened. Okay, and? Harold said. While you may find your current condition no longer strange, Sunset is still a bioterrorist, said Anthony. You knew her by her alias, Sadie Summers. Jenny flinched. Sadie is a bioterrorist, Harold deadpanned. Seriously? Sarah stepped up to him. I don't quite understand everything about this either, Harry, but you can't deny the trouble she caused this family, even if we're past that. She was the Fae Queen all along, Jenny murmured. Sarah sighed. Jenny, not now, please. Jenny blinked. Hey? Oh, sorry. Never mind. So let me get this straight, said Harold. Laura was associating with a supposed criminal all this time, and no pony bothered to tell her. We couldn't risk Sunset knowing we were on to her, Mr. Tanner, said Anthony. I can't divulge all the details now, but we were contacted by entities who were aware of Sunset's actions and wished to assist us in stopping her. Harry, it's over now, said Sarah. Laura is safe. That's all I care about. I've spoken with your physician, said Anthony. He recommends you tell your daughter the truth. Sarah nodded. We should, yes. Can we finally see her now? Anthony stood. I'll go tell the others to bring her in. You can take as long as you wish to speak with her, then let the technicians in the hallway know when you're ready to return to the shelter. Thank you. Anthony nodded and headed out. Harold watched him go before saying to Sarah. Was he the one who interrogated you? Yes, Sarah said in a low voice. I wish you had told me that before now so I could have given him a piece of my mind for drawing a gun on you. He did what? Jenny cried. That's precisely why I didn't tell you, said Sarah. And, please, Jenny, calm down. It was a misunderstanding. You saw how cordial he was acting now. At the time he had no idea what was going on or who was behind it. Harold turned to Jenny. What was that you said before about the Fey Queen? Jenny scraped a forehoof against the floor. Nothing. Jenny, you can tell us, Harold said softly. Yes, you can, said Sarah. I silenced you earlier only because I wanted to focus on the matter of your sister. Everything we talked about concerning your fantasies the other day still holds. You don't have to be afraid to discuss them anymore. Really, it's nothing, said Jenny. I don't think it's any secret that I had a character I called the Fey Queen who was using magic to change her subjects. She trailed off for a moment. I saw her in a dream I had recently, and she really didn't look anything like Sunny did. Sarah tilted her head. The dream you had this morning? Yeah, that one. Before Sarah could reply, a soft knock sounded at the door, and Kevin's face appeared as it opened. He smiled as he said, I believe I have someone here who wants to see you. Sarah uttered a small gasp as her eyes fell on the yellow-furred, orange-haired Pegasus filly who stepped into the room. Laura. A huge smile stretched across Laura's muzzle, and Sarah's mouth dropped open when her daughter flew across the distance and drew Sarah into a tight hug, wings still holding Laura aloft. Oh, God, Mom, I missed you, Laura said in a quavering voice. She drew back and added, I missed all of you. Harold and Jenny hugged her in turn, Jenny most ardently of all. When Jenny drew back and saw Laura still hovering, she smirked and said, You ever actually, land? Laura glanced down in bemusement and laughed. I guess I'm getting so used to flying that I just don't think about it anymore. Harold grinned. Pay no attention to her, Laura, you fly as much as you want. You've got wings, after all. Laura looked at her mother. And you've got a horn. Have you been using it? Sarah smiled faintly. Yes, I have. I'm starting to get the hang of it. She doesn't drop stuff nearly as much anymore, said Jenny. Laura looked around. Where's Bob? His transformation is not quite finished, said Sarah. He has trouble getting around right now. I hope it's not for much longer. I felt really awkward that last night. She looked at Sarah's face. Is something the matter? Sarah hesitated before she said in a more somber voice. I have something I need to tell you, but I want to ask you a question first, and I want you to tell me the truth. Laura gave her a quizzical look. Sure, why wouldn't I? Your friend Sunny, said Sarah in a slightly quavering voice. Has she been talking to you at all? Oh, yes, all the time, Laura said. She's really been encouraging me, which is why I was so upset when she was taken away. I still don't understand what happened. Sarah felt a vague sense of disappointment. She had heard nothing to confirm Sunny was some sort of evil monster. What was wrong with encouraging a young Pegasus who was using her wings for the first time? If Sarah had been there, she likely would have been just as supportive. She never told you anything, well, out of place? Anything that was bad? Laura settled on her hooves and folded her wings. Of course not. What's going on, Mom? Why are you asking all these things? Sarah took a deep breath. Laura, Sunny's been arrested. Laura's pupils shrank, and she recoiled, drawing her ears back. What? Why? For starting this transformation in the first place. Laura stared. That doesn't make sense. She was changing along with every pony else. She didn't know what was behind it, either. She lied to you, Laura. Laura's eyes shimmered. No, that's not right. I'm sorry, said Kevin. But it's true. Laura flinched, as if forgetting Kevin was still there. She looked at her mother and frowned. No, this is stupid. Sunny is no criminal. She's changing humans into ponies against their will, Sarah said. Mom, I know we didn't ask for this, but... And no matter what we feel about it now, she shouldn't have done that, and she shouldn't have lied to you. Laura's lower lip quivered. Why are you saying this? Sarah stepped closer to her. You have to know the truth. Laura swallowed hard. This. So what? Sarah could only stare at her daughter. So what if she changed us? What if this was for the better? Sarah had no reply for Laura, and one look at Harold's face confirmed that he had no greater wisdom than she. How could she stand there and tell Laura that she was wrong when in many ways, she was clearly right? The end result doesn't matter, Sarah said, though her voice lacked conviction. Why the hell not? Laura cried. Do you know what my friends and I did the other day? We created a cloud and made it rain. Indoors. Sarah stared. You really, but... We can control the weather. For years I felt like I had almost no control over my life, and now I can make it rain. I wish this happened to me a long time ago. Sarah wanted to take back everything and pretend it was just a big mistake. She was so proud of her daughter for finally finding something she really wanted to do and for taking the first steps in becoming an independent and successful mare. All she ever wanted was the best for her children. Why should this be any different? Ponies always forgive. That was what the mare in her dream had told her. Yet it wasn't up to her to forgive. What she thought about it didn't matter. Sunset had committed a crime, even if it was one Sarah had trouble understanding. She didn't want her daughter admiring a criminal, but she couldn't make that decision for Laura. I'm sorry I made you upset, said Sarah. I'm not about to tell you to stop what you're doing. I can't do that any more than you can just stop being who and what you are. I'm just struggling to understand this, Laura said. She was so encouraging, so helpful, and now you're telling me it was just part of some sort of evil scheme? Did she care about me at all? I was told that Sunny would never harm you, said Sarah. And this was from some pony who knows her very well. But I can't stop being your mother. I worried about you and had to make sure you were safe. You also deserved the truth. If I may, said Kevin. I have also been in contact with the pony who knows Sunset best. I suspect she considers Sunset more badly misguided than outright evil. Sunset may have genuinely cared for your well-being, Laura. May have, Laura said in a flat voice. But you don't know. No pony can, said Harold. But it doesn't matter. You don't need her, you have us. Sarah's eyes glistened. Laura, honey, I am so very proud of you. We've already heard about some of the things you did, and not just your weather skills. Laura slowly nodded. I just don't want everything that I've done to be a big lie. I've made more friends than I've ever had in my whole life. I have a whole new talent now that I really want to explore further. Laura? Jenny asked in a tentative voice. Laura turned her head. Yes. Jenny stepped up to her. Can you really control the weather already? I can't exactly stop a storm in its tracks, said Laura softly. But maybe someday. You don't have to do that for me. I'm sorry. You didn't do anything wrong when I was 5, said Jenny. It wasn't your fault. You don't have to make up for it. Sarah was almost in tears. Now she had 2 daughters she was proud of. Laura's eyes glistened, and she hugged Jenny tightly. Maybe that's what it started out as, but I'm trying hard to move on. I really am doing this for myself. Then it doesn't matter that Sunny lied to you, said Sarah. It doesn't take away from anything you've done. Laura broke off the hug and turned to her mother. I know, but it still hurts. I might not have tried any of the things I did if it hadn't been for her. I might have just stayed in my shell. Then perhaps she did some good after all, but there's still her greater crime to consider. Despite the outcome, she caused this family and many others a lot of grief. I know, but I can't quite wrap my head around it yet. I need time to think on it. Laura glanced at Kevin. And I really hope I can see Sunny one more time. I want to hear her side of it. I want to know why she felt she had to lie. That may be a tall order, Kevin said. But if this crisis has taught me anything, it's that nothing is impossible. Laura smiled faintly before turning back to her family. Let's go back into the shelter, please. I want to meet all your new friends. Sarah smiled. And you're okay with that? Yes, I am, said Laura firmly. It was silly of me to avoid making friends because I thought I would lose them when we moved away. If anything, we're all going to have to come together. That's why I can hardly wait until they release us all. Sarah could understand better why Laura had such trouble seeing Sunset in a bad light. Laura had gained everything Sarah had ever wanted for her: friends, confidence, and above all, happiness. Let's head back, said Sarah. And then you can tell us all the details about what you and your friends did. Yeah, I want to hear about the indoor rain shower, Jenny said. Laura giggled. I'd be happy to. I'll let them know that you're ready to head back, said Kevin. Sarah turned to him. Dr. Connor? Could you come back with us? I do have other duties to get back to, but I could visit for a short while. May I ask what the occasion is? Heather wants to talk to you. Asterisk. When Kevin had first received the call from Heather that had effectively been a goodbye, all he had wanted to do was see her again. Now he wasn't as sure. When he had entered Laura's shelter, he had managed to remain more detached. Seeing a sea of colorful ponies where humans once were had been less of a shock as he had stayed at the periphery, both physically and emotionally. Now he had to wade deep into it. Being a stranger among a nascent pony society was impossible, and not just because this shelter held a large concentration of his former patients. They were just inherently more friendly, many stopping to say hello or wave a forehoof or sometimes a wing in his direction. He admitted to not recognizing many of them unless they spoke and he recalled the voice, but even then it was hard. His brain was still wired to recognize human faces. Thus he took shameless advantage of the fact that Heather was one of the unique crystal ponies. There was no mistaking the light green-furred, cyan-maned mare as every hair on her body sparkled, made even more dramatic by the shaft of sunlight from the skylights that lay across part of her barrel and haunches. Seeing Heather completely transformed hit him harder than seeing the tanners. She had taken the gamble that all medical practitioners do and lost, that she would not contract whatever ailment her patient had. He almost thought it wasn't fair that he should be spared and she wasn't. Kevin had also discovered that it was near impossible to find a pony alone, and Heather was no exception. She spoke with a unicorn mare with a bright magenta mane and tail, her fur a dusky red. Her barrel was swollen in pregnancy. Heather and the unicorn turned towards Kevin as he approached. The unicorn smiled and stepped up first. Dr. Connor. It's good to see you again. Kevin finally put the hair color to the voice, and he forced a weak smile. Hello, Carol. I trust you're doing well. That's what they tell me, anyway. I certainly feel better than I did when I last saw you. Carol had been the pregnant woman who had come to see him the week before when her OB/GNY was out of town. You were worried about the upcoming birth. I'm a lot more calm about it now, said Carol. They took imaging of me recently. As far as they can tell, I'm going to have a perfectly healthy unicorn foal. He apparently changed right along with me, and I didn't really have anything to worry about. Kevin could understand a bit better now why many scientists were embroiled in a sometimes heated debate as to whether or not the mind alterations were considered brainwashing. He hadn't wanted to see it that way, but he was looking through his admittedly biased perspective of wanting to see his patients happy and healthy. Former patients. He had to keep reminding himself of that. He glanced at Heather. She was smiling as well, but whether because she was inherently happier now or because Carol was happy, he couldn't tell. I'm glad to hear things are working out for you, Carol. I wish you only the best. Heather finally spoke. Carol, I'd like to talk to Kevin for a bit. Of course, said Carol. Please, come join my husband and I when you're done. His sister would love to meet you. Heather's smile widened, and she nodded. After Carol headed off, she turned to Kevin and hesitated, her smile fading slightly in the awkward pause. Kevin, I wanted to apologize. Kevin took a moment to force his mind to associate the small pony standing before him with his assistant who had graced his office for so long. You don't need to, Heather, he said in a soft voice. No, I do. I rejected our friendship. You deserve more than that. Your feelings were conflicted at the time. Heather averted her eyes for a moment. I guess they were. I'm still feeling like the odd pony out. I feel like I should know what I can do, but I'm not sure. Before she had sequestered herself with Starlight in Sunset's home to work on the artifacts and the portal, Twilight had mentioned something about finding a means to mass-cast the counterspell, and that it involved the crystal ponies. After seeing for himself just how accepting the Tanner family had been of their transformation, would they even want to help with such an endeavor? Heather, can I ask you something? Of course, said Heather. You know you always can. Do you want to go back to what you were doing before this happened? If you mean, do I want to help my fellow ponies, certainly, said Heather without hesitation. I'm just not sure how I'm going to do that quite yet. What about other humans? Heather gave him a nonplussed look. I don't understand. Kevin felt guilty for grilling Heather like this. She had likely just wanted to rekindle their long-standing friendship, and now he felt like he was interrogating her. He needed to pull back. Never mind that for now, said Kevin in a softer voice. Heather, despite that phone call, I never stopped being your friend, but sometimes part of being a friend is knowing when someone needs their own space. Heather slowly smiled. I appreciate that, Kevin, but I'm over that now. I know things might never be quite the same again. I doubt I'll ever be able to help you reopen that office, but that doesn't mean we have to go our separate ways. Kevin wanted to believe that, but where their relationship had centered largely around their shared profession, he was not sure what they had in common anymore. They weren't even the same species. When did your transformation complete? This morning, said Heather. Sarah Tanner was a huge help to me yesterday when I could barely do anything for myself. Kevin smiled more naturally. The Tanners are good people. Heather stepped closer to Kevin. So what was that you said about helping other humans? What was that all about? Maybe this isn't the best time for... No, out with it. I know you too well, Kevin. You have something on your mind. Kevin hesitated. There's a possibility that we may have figured out a way to stop those who are still fully human from transforming. They figured out a cure. Yes, but they may need ponies like you to help distribute it. Heather's eyes widened, but she had no immediate response. How do you feel about that? Kevin asked. Heather glanced to the side. I'm not sure. Do you want to prevent this from spreading? Heather hesitated before looking back at Kevin. If it looks like I'm struggling with this, it's only because of a vision we all had. I'm aware of it, said Kevin. So now I'm asking myself, wasn't it my purpose to help others be healthy? Wouldn't contributing to the well-being of my fellow ponies do that? But what of those still human? That's what I'm having trouble with, Heather said. On the one hoof, we were all better off after the transformation finished. Many of us can do things we never could before. On the other, I never had any thoughts about forcing other humans to change. I remember that people were upset over it when it was happening when no one knew where this was really going. Heather, it's been confirmed that this was a biological attack. Heather's ears drew back and her pupils shrank. This was intentionally done to you, said Kevin. Perhaps the end result was not the same had this been anthrax or Ebola, but it was still done against your will. Heather hesitated a long moment. Then was the vision a complete lie? From what I understand, it has its merits, said Kevin. Certainly ponies have to come together for their own benefit. We did as humans, just perhaps not as enthusiastically. But did anything in the vision mention spreading this to others? No, nothing like that at all, said Heather. It only spoke of ponies, not humans. Then I think you are free to decide for yourself. The vision didn't dictate to me, Kevin, said Heather firmly. But it did speak to me, and the fact that all of us had it implied it had some importance. It made sense. I can't help but want to see others have a chance at a good life. At the same time, forcing humans to be like us is not right. In fact, I'd even say that would go against the vision. It's unkind and dishonest. Kevin smiled. So you would be willing to help? Yes, I would, said Heather. But I also need to see to the needs of my own community as well. I wouldn't dream of telling you otherwise, said Kevin. Just tell me what I need to do. I don't have those details yet, Kevin said. But I'll let you know when I do. Heather nodded. Kevin? Could you come down here, please? Kevin was unsure what Heather meant until she gestured with a hoof. He crouched down so he could be at eye level with her. Before he could speak, she threw her forelegs around him and pulled him into a hug. Kevin's face was plunged into her mane, and he was again taken by how soft pony hair was. He breathed in her scent, a bit heady but nothing like the strong odor of native equines. He wanted to embrace her in return but was unsure of where he could safely squeeze her. All it took was the strength of her own hug to remind him that she was an earth pony first and foremost, and anything he could do was a drop in the bucket by comparison. He wrapped his arms around her neck and barrel. We had a great run together, Kevin, said Heather in a slightly choked voice. Maybe this will be a way we can keep working together. Kevin closed his eyes and hugged her tighter. I'm looking forward to it as always. Asterisk. When Laura first started to recount her exploits in the other shelter, she had stood on her hooves, but that didn't last long. As she grew more excited, she leaped into the air and punctuated her account with brief aerial acrobatics. Laura didn't want to admit that this was also a pep talk to herself. Hearing the truth about Sunny had threatened to shatter some of the self-confidence she had gained. She had to convince herself that Sunny had only been a catalyst, that she had it in herself to do these things. I have to admit, Laura, creating that cloud was a bit of a bold move, said Sarah. While Laura heard the pride in her mother's voice, she also heard the undertone of admonishment. It wasn't just me that wanted to do it, Mom. We had a lot more support, and not just from Sunny. Oh, I wasn't referring to her, said Sarah. Laura wanted to believe that, just like she wanted to believe that her mother was telling her the truth about Sunny. Not that she believed Sarah would lie to her, but what if some pony had lied to Sarah? She desperately wanted to talk to Sunny again, just to hear it from her. Honestly, I'm beginning to think you take more after your father than me, Sarah added with a small smile. Hey! Harold said. Sarah glanced at him. What Laura did sounds exactly like something you might do if you had wings. Do you also have a sense for the weather? Bob asked. Laura looked over to him and tried not to wince. His state reminded her all too much of that final awkward night before she woke up as a full Pegasus pony. He sat on his bedroll as he could no longer stand properly. Everything below the waist was almost fully equine, and his horn had fully emerged. Yes, I do, said Laura. I didn't understand at first what all those sensations were until Emma, Joan, and I started creating that cloud, and then it all fell into place. I can sense things like pressure and humidity. So you can predict the weather, too? Harold asked. Jenny snorted. Who needs to predict it when she can make the weather? Laura giggled and smiled. Ever since their reunion, Jenny had been her most enthusiastic supporter. She hoped it wasn't just because her cloud-making feat was the sort of throw caution to the wind move that was worthy of Jenny herself. She instead wanted to think that they had somehow wound back the clock, and now they again enjoyed the relationship that they once had as foals. Thanks, Jenny. It's more like predicting weather trends, Dad. I can't tell you for sure that it will rain or snow tomorrow, but I can say this month will be warmer and drier than the weather forecast is claiming. Unless you decide to change it, said Jenny. Sarah draped a foreleg over Jenny's barrel. Honey, she can't go indiscriminately changing the weather. Who said anything about indiscriminate? Said Jenny. You heard Dad, he wants to go back to farming. Laura tilted her head. What's this? Harold rubbed a hoof through his mane. It's just something I've been thinking about. Because of the vision we all had. That's part of it, yeah. And you can't do that if it's going to be too dry, right? Jenny asked. Well, yeah, said Harold. But I can't ask Laura to. You don't have to ask. Laura cried. My Pegasus friends and I would love to help. Dad, I'm dying to see what we can do. You can't imagine how badly I want the open skies. When they brought me here, I really hoped they would let me fly. Instead, they stuffed me in a stupid paramedic van. I'm getting tired of being treated like a patient. There's nothing wrong with me anymore. There's nothing wrong with any of us. She glanced at Bob and blushed faintly. What I mean is... Bob smiled faintly and shook his head. It's fine, Laura. He glanced at the others. I did want to talk to you about something. Sure, go ahead. It's kind of personal. Is everything okay? Harold asked in concern. It's fine, Dad, but I do want to talk to her alone. Laura smiled. This was the first time she had heard Bob openly call Harold Dad. This is what she struggled with most of all. If what Sunny had done was supposed to be so bad, why did so much turn out for the better? Her family had not been this close in years. Let's go talk to Carol, said Sarah. She's expecting her first foal, and she and her husband wanted to talk to us about how we raised our children. You do realize those were human children and not pony children at the time, right? Harold said. Sarah smirked. It's called moral support, Harry. Come on. I'll go see if I can find James, said Jenny before she cantered off. Laura settled on her hooves and folded her wings. What did you want to talk to me about? When you were in the state I am now, said Bob. What were you thinking? That I wanted it to be over. But was that it? Laura considered. I had a long conversation with my friends. We all wanted to know what we could really do. I was sure that my wings would work, and then when Sunny showed us, well, never mind that. Point is, the next morning, I started flying and my unicorn friend Kelly was moving stuff with her horn. I want to use my horn, said Bob. I think I've already figured out how, but all I can do right now is throw sparks. Laura remembered how fluidly Sunny had used her own horn even before she was completely transformed. She was the only one who had managed it, the other unicorns-to-be who tried it couldn't do it until the next morning when they were fully pony. Proof of Sunny's deception, perhaps, but she couldn't forget how Sunny had used her power specifically to help Laura contact her mother. Hardly the act of an evil monster. You'll be able to use it by tomorrow, I'm sure, said Laura with a smile. It's not what I expected, said Bob. It's not just willing stuff to happen. I can sense it has rules and structure. Even the simple levitation that the other unicorns are doing, it's like a little program already wired in my head. See, now you know how I felt, said Laura excitedly. I felt like I could do all these things and just needed to get past the weird in-between state. I want to get past it, too, but I promised myself to ask you something before I do. Do you miss being human? Laura thought back to her impassioned conversation with her mother earlier. She had said she wished this had happened to her a long time ago. I remember what it was like to be human, but I don't want to go back to it. What if you could have everything that you do now? Asked Bob. What then? Laura found it easy to dismiss the question. She was a pony, so why bother speculating otherwise? Yet she didn't want to hurt Bob's feelings, and he never brought up anything unless there was a point to it, even if she didn't see it right away. I'm not sure. I guess I'm not as concerned with the body I have as I am about whether I'm happy or not. I want to feel that way. I think I can, I just still have something that's telling me I shouldn't. I want to ignore it. It would be easy to ignore, in fact. If her mother had not handed her the bombshell that was Sunny's deception, she would have fallen back on the shared vision, but was that just part of Sunny's plan? Should it even matter considering the vision was positive? It wasn't like Sunny had called upon Ponykind to fall to their knees in worship of her, or to turn against the remaining humans. I don't know what to tell you, Bob, I'm sorry, said Laura. All I can say is, no pony can stop what's happening to you, so maybe you just need to make the best of it. Bob was quiet for a long moment. I'm still going to try to remember things as they were. I'm going to try to remember the things that I used to be able to do, things that I liked to do. Laura smiled faintly. In a way, she envied Bob. While perhaps his relationship with his biological mother was strained, he at least had things he could do he was proud of. All Laura could point to was some vague goal of being more responsible without really understanding what that meant. She couldn't let this cause her any doubt. She had an exciting future ahead of her, and she had to concentrate on that. Nothing else mattered. It will work out, I'm sure of it, Laura said softly.